The budget introduced an outline of how liquid natural gas revenues will be structured. But in doing so, the government continues to deny a fundamental contradiction. This is a contradiction we must confront as a province before moving ahead to exploit this resource. This contradiction, a painful and glaring contradiction, is between the government's LNG goals and the urgent need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. It is an obvious and enormously consequential truth that if the Premier were to deliver on her LNG promises, BC could not even come close to meeting our targets for reduction of GHG emissions. Are the good members opposite so blinded by the billions that just might flow into government coffers through this risky gamble of LNG that they cannot see the devastating environmental consequences which could result? Leaving aside, for reasons of time today, the tremendously important question of freshwater usage and other unaddressed health and environmental concerns with current fracking techniques, of which an independent scientific study could address, there remains the challenge of LNG's carbon pollution. For the Premier to keep her election-winning promise of a debt-free BC, she will need 5 LNG plants online. According to the Pembina Institute, those plants and the shale gas extraction and processing associated with them would create more than 73 megatons of carbon pollution each year. 73 megatons. And yet, our modest legislative climate targets are 43 megatons by 2020 and 13 megatons by 2050. In other words, the government is promising a new industry that brings with it 73 megatons of carbon pollution in a year, while maintaining legislation requiring province-wide emission reductions to 13 megatons a year. What hypocrisy! Instead of acknowledging this contradiction, the government said in its throne speech that LNG is, quote, the greatest single step we can take to fight climate change, unquote. That was a whopper big enough to make George Orwell blush. Natural gas is a valuable resource. It could and perhaps should be used as a transitional fuel as we move towards a low-carbon economy. But to get there, we need this government to come clean about the consequences of LNG and lead a much-needed debate on how best to take advantage of this resource. Instead, we are insulted with exaggerated promises that contradict the environmental crisis we face in this province.